Welcome back to the Filmmakers Podcast. This is episode 437. The Filmmakers Podcast is a show that takes you behind the scenes of the movies you love, chatting with the directors, producers, screenwriters, and crew about how they get their movies and TV shows made. This week, we're diving deep into the world of architectural drama and historical fiction with the incredible team behind The Brutalist. Joining us today is the visionary director, Brady Corbet. He started off acting in films like Mysterious Skin and Funny Games. Brady then transitioned seamlessly to directing captivating audiences with his unique and powerful films like The Childhood of the Leader and Vox Lux. His latest work, The Brutalist, promises another cinematic triumph. And we are also thrilled to be joined by the Oscar-winning production designer Judy Becker. Judy's incredible eye for detail has graced some of the most iconic films of recent years, including American Hustle, Silver Linings Playbook, and Deepwater Horizon. I'd say her ability to create immersive and evocative worlds is truly unparalleled, and you are going to love what she has to say about her work on The Brutalist, which is a sweeping epic starring Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones, which follows a Jewish architect's journey from post-war Europe to the United States as he struggles to rebuild his life and career. Stunning to watch. 3.5 hours long with an interval. It is brilliant. It's got massively powerful performances, and The Brutalist has already garnered critical acclaim and a slew of Oscar nominations, including nods for Best Director and Best Actor for Adrian Brody and Best Director there for Brady Corbet, and also for production design for Judy Becker. Got two of them on the podcast. And Best Supporting Actor for Guy Pearce. Now, as a special treat, Guy Pearce will be joining us on Friday. Yep, special episode. I got to sit down with Guy Pearce and chat all about his career and making The Brutalist. In for a treat, aren't you? A huge thank you to all those who came out to the Food for Thought world premiere that we had on Friday. We had over 380 people in the room at the Royal Geographical Society for the world premiere. If you've not seen the images on our socials, do go have a look. I'm at Giles Alderson, you can find me, but at the Filmmakers Podcast has been retweeting a few of those as well. It was an incredible event. I'm still blown away by the whole thing. I'm very much overwhelmed. I'm still trying to take it all in, but the feedback was just yeah, it was wonderful. It was really nice. Certainly what they were saying to our faces anyway. Behind the back's another story, who knows? But anyway, the love was amazing. The room was filled with positive, wonderful people. And I'm very grateful for anyone listening here who did come down and support. Thank you. The movie will be out at the end of February. I will tell you all about that in an episode coming up. But first, let's start with Brady Corbet. Dom Lenoir sat down and had a lovely chat with him about his career and what he puts into his films, what he does, what he thinks about as a director. And obviously, we dive into The Brutalist as well. Let's play the trailer, and I will see you the other side of that chat.
Cousin. There's him. Is alive. What?
These are yours, yes?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
I'm afraid it is not so simple. There was a war on, and yet many of the sites of my projects had survived. My buildings were devised to endure such erosion of shoreline.
I brought you all out here to join me in looking forward toward the future.
What do you think?
It's unusual, even for you.
Your English is impressive. Perhaps you can help your husband sound less like he shined shoes for a wage.
I'm sorry, will you please pass that back?
They do not want us here.
Who do you mean?
The people here, they do not want us here.
When dogs get sick, they often bite the hand of those who fed them, until someone mercifully puts them down.
I promise.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good.
So how are you doing anyway? I mean, massive congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
How are you feeling about the reception? I mean, I managed to watch the film in London, which was fantastic on a big screen, and the whole interval and the cinema experience with an audience. Like, how are you sort of responding to those feelings?
We're touched and delighted, of course. I mean, it's sort of like whiplash for us because as recently as 6 months ago, I was having conversations where many folks were telling me that the film was undistributable. So I am very I'm very, very pleased that it's been reaching such a wide audience.
Yeah, and I think the whole interval idea and breaking those norms of distribution seems like a sort of a tantamount to the quality of the film. And it's the reception so far in that you've got the breadth to do that, and I think it's quite impressive that you've kind of fought for that that leeway within the movie. And it does kind of feel from people I've spoken to, it does feel like there's a shift between the sort of the two halves of the film, and it works quite nicely to have that that breathing space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love an intermission, and also when once a film is over 3 hours long, especially, I just sort of need one as an audience member, and so it was it was a public facing decision.
So let's go back to the origins of the film and the story. Was it always this length? Was it always intended to be in this format?
The screenplay was the first draft, which is the film. We never adjusted anything other than a couple of monologues in the middle of the film. It was about 168 pages. And so, yeah, we knew it was a big story, and the intermission was also scripted. But the way that Mona and I work is that generally we'll have spoken about a project for a couple of years before we sit down to execute a draft. And so, the process of finishing the draft was just 6 or 7 weeks. I mean, it was written quite quickly, but that's because we sort of have figured out, most of the arc in advance, and the dialogue and stuff. It's quite nice to have a writing partner because it's something where we can really sort of ping pong back and forth between the two of us, and I think that really helps bring it to life.
I think when you do those when you go deep into the research and you go deep into the discussion, it's a very nice way to write, and I think it allows things to breathe. It allows for you to really expand the whole world around the sort of the main storyline. I mean, what was the sort of start point for coming across the idea and that initial kind of idea developing process?
Mona and I had wanted to do a film on architecture for quite some time. We both grew up with architects in our family. Her grandfather was an architect in Norway in the 50s and 60s. And my uncle, who lived with my mother and I had a single mother and I was an only child. And he lived with us when he was attending Taliesin West, Frank Lloyd Wright School in Arizona. So I spent a lot of my childhood there.
Amazing.
And we had also wanted to do a film on the post-war years, the 1950s, for a variety of reasons. I mean, mostly because for some reason, the sort of contemporary conservative agenda seems to really romanticize the 1950s Americana, which I find sort of fascinating because of course it was a less than ideal moment in time. It was a difficult time to be certainly be a woman. My grandmother, she had a job that she loved. She was working for the airlines, and when she became pregnant, she was immediately fired. And she went on to have 6 children. But I remember growing up with these portraits of her with her colleagues at Pan Am all over the house, and it was clearly something she was so proud of, and yet it was it was another life that she lived too briefly. And so I think I just think it's very odd the way that this period has been romanticized. I mean, Simone and I had discussed, doing a film on post-war architecture and how post-war trauma and post-war architecture were intrinsically linked.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point about what you display in the film, and it was a perspective I hadn't really seen in film, which is you sort of see the finishing of the war in thousands of movies, and you see the kind of the liberation of the Jewish people, and you see everyone celebrating back to peace, back to sort of success and rebuilding their lives, and there is this kind of rose tinted view of everything, but actually there's a side of people that haven't necessarily changed their views in a positive way. There's people that are struggling to integrate. As you said, women are not in the sort of place they should be in society. And I think you did a very good job of sort of bringing a lot of those issues to light, under the backdrop of the film in a way that I haven't really seen done before.
Yeah, well, I agree that presenting the end of the war as a happily ever after, when of course decades of processing that trauma is what's left. And I was also, we were thinking a lot about not just the lives lost, but the livelihoods that were lost. To have, I went to an architectural scholar called Jean-Louis Cohen, and I asked him, is there an example of an architect from the mid-century that got stuck in the quagmire of the war and was able then to rebuild their firm? Thank you so much. Rebuild their firm or some version of it in the 1950s, and he couldn't come up with a single example. And so when my production designer Judy Becker and I sat down, we were also thinking a lot about ways of honoring the unrealized projects from the Bauhaus. There were only a handful of designers that were successful enough by the mid 1930s that they were able to get posts in the U.S. working at the universities, and everyone that was just starting out. I mean, no one really knows what it became of them. And so my designer and I decided, that the best place to start when we were coming up with a body of work for our fictional character was to look at a lot of those unrealized projects. And
in terms of like where to kind of start the story, was there any temptation in the sort of development stage to go into the war, like further back in time? No,
the movie always started the way it started and always ended the way that it ended. I don't know. I suppose that I have an instinct when I'm working that the first thought is the best thought, usually. I mean, there are absolutely exceptions to the rule, but I try not to second guess myself too much throughout the process, because it's not that beneficial to anyone. And frankly, you can sort of tie yourself in knots and never really finish a project if you are constantly reevaluating it. Now, there's certain things that if there's something that I haven't quite sorted out. I will occasionally move on and come back to it, but it's pretty rare. I mean, they're mostly written in a quite linear fashion.
So what is the process in terms of? I mean, you said that the first draft of the script was fairly rapid in the actual writing process. Do you kind of each take a scene? Do you write chronologically, then the other person writes? What's that collaboration? How does it work?
We're not too dogmatic about it. Mona and I we're a couple. We have a 10-year-old daughter together, but we worked together before we were a couple. Which I think is the reason that we're able to work together, because it's sort of how we got to know each other. And sometimes I will work on something late into the night, which she will then pick up in the morning. And sometimes we sit down and actually physically write together. It really depends. And we've been doing it for such a long time that it's really become like second nature for us.
And what was the kind of process once you'd finished the script in terms of getting the cast on board? Because I mean, you've got an incredible cast attached to this, and they feel so so perfect for it.
It took a long time. I mean, it was a huge ensemble. It took a couple of years, the first iteration of the project, to cast as many roles as we needed in place to be able to take it to the market and start raising money for the project. Because that generally on independent films is sort of the order of business. You build a cast and a crew, and then you take that to, the 20 to 30 financiers that finance films in this budget range. I mean, there's not that many. There's surprisingly few, actually. In 2020, we took the project to market in I believe it was late February or March of 2020. It was the week that New York City shut down because of COVID. And I remember I wanted nothing more than to put the jack back in the box, because the way that those things work, once you've exposed a project, it's very, very difficult to sort of reintroduce it to the marketplace a couple of years later. That is, in fact, what we ended up having to do. But because it had sort of sat around for such a long time, people tend to sort of wonder what's wrong with it, when in fact, there's usually nothing wrong with these projects, but it's just circumstances that don't allow them to necessarily launch off, in their first iteration. And at that time in 2020, people were, of course, not investing in anything at all, much less a 3-hour plus film about a mid-century designer.
Yeah, it was such a huge moment for so many films, and I suppose from the stories I hear, a lot of projects got killed, but a lot of projects, in a strange way, it kind of gave them a second life. It gave them the time to sort of come back, a breather for people, and I think now people are sort of hungry for this kind of original content, but at the time it must have been a very challenging time to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was completely depressing, and every project I've ever made has usually fallen apart 2 or 3 times. But this film there were several moments that felt really like it was a bullet in the head of the project. But I'm quite stubborn, and so is my wife, and we sort of just kept kicking the tires on it. And it became clear that the only way to make the film was to make it for well under $10 million, and we knew that would be difficult, simply because you're shooting something which is the length of 2 short feature films, and so there are just there's only so much sand to move around in the box. We knew that we needed, minimum, 32 to 33 days to shoot the film, which for us is actually quite long. We had always, it's short for a lot of other productions, but for us, we had never made anything that had a schedule that was longer than 24 days. So Vox Lux was 22, Childhood was 24, but we were working child's hours because the little boy that starred in the film was 7 years old. And then on this film, we knew that we needed, at least 30. So, and that it would still be a rush. But we sort of backed into a number and, figured.
Which can sometimes help. It can sometimes help to give yourself that limitation, I suppose, because then you.
Well, I mean, that's sort of looking at the glass half full. I think that's the way. I think that's the way people narrativize these things. I think that the film, honestly, if we had had more money, it would have been the same film. Mm-hmm. It just would have been, a more peaceful process, and we would have had, it would have been a healthier process. I mean, I spent the first week and a half of the film on an IV because I was so incredibly run down, and we were trying to pack what would have normally been 20 weeks of pre-production into about 8 or 9, and all that means is that you work day and night, and you work on weekends, and that's for everybody. So it's just it was just quite a relentless process.
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty exhausting, and I think you kind of you have to. In a way, sometimes there's a moment when you just have to do whatever it takes to get the film made, and it sounds like that was very much the case here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately, you have to put the project first and everything else second. But there's only so many times in one's life that you can really do that, because it's a real burden for. Family, friends, and your colleagues. So, I'm hoping that the next film will be no less formally rigorous, but I think that, ideally the process will be a little bit more normal, and which is just to say that we get weekends and get to leave the office at 6 p.m.
Yeah, and it's important if you can build it in to have those moments just to decompress, because it's when you're on set, there's just so many hundreds of questions and problems to solve all day, every day, and then you get back home and you want to relax, but you've got problems for the next day to sort, and it's a very relentless process.
Absolutely. No, the post-production process on the film was 22 months. So it was 22 months of post, and in the last 4 months of post, my wife and I had written a musical together that she was directing, that suddenly kicked into gear. And so we've never had two projects overlap that way. So, I was shooting with her. I was doing second unit during the day, and then I was working on post for the film at night. I was working with Los Angeles, but I was shooting in Hungary. So it really was like a 24-hour clock. And by the end of the summer, I mean, I felt totally depleted, and I sort of just had my eye on the prize. I was like, okay, we'll get to Venice, we'll premiere the film, and then finally I'll get some time off. And then that turned out to be not the case. The film when we signed with A24 to take on the film for U.S. distribution, and they dated it for December 20th. We're delighted because it felt really like the right thing to do for the movie. But on a personal level, I mean, we were just, we were devastated.
Needed a breather, yeah.
We were like, oh my God, all we want is like a few weeks at home with our daughter. But I've been on a flight, every 5 or 6 days, since this, since we premiered. So it's been pretty relentless.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like it. So I mean, just jumping back a little bit. So we talked about the COVID first block of the project, so to speak. What was there anything that particularly changed other than you mentioned the budget of let's do it for under 10 million that led to maybe, I mean, was it cast that came on board first? Did you manage to get through to them before you got the distribution?
Yeah, no, I mean, certain roles were recast several times over the course of the process, and Adrian and I met pretty early. I think that I want to say we met in in 2019.
Okay.
But finally, everything, schedules aligned and everything became possible in 2022. And I was really thrilled because Adrian's mother is Hungarian. She fled Hungary in 1956 during the revolution. And so there really was no one that was more correct for the role than Adrian.
And personally resonant, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, Hungarian's also such an incredibly difficult language. That I was thrilled that he had, some level of familiarity with it. Not only because he speaks Hungarian in the film, but it's an incredibly difficult accent. It's an accent that if you're not careful, you end up sounding like Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, and so I mean, Adrian, what was your? I mean, was it just sending him a letter to his agent? To get him initially hooked, was it just a sort of personal?
It was a pretty traditional process. We'd never met before. I sent it to him through his reps, and we sat down, and we really, really connected. I remember I was quite moved from our initial conversation because we got past pleasantries pretty quickly and started discussing his family history. And, he's someone who really wears his heart on his sleeve and is, just an emotionally available guy. And I was really struck by it. And I really thought when I met him, wow, like he will imbue the character with this warmth that is not necessarily on the page, because the character is written, to be sort of a bastard. Because mid-century designers, Louis Kahn had 3 families. So, our character has a wandering eye. He's sort of the movie version, but he was intended to be a little bit of a bastard, and the thought process behind that, and this is what I also had said to Adrian, was I hate the idea that survivors in films are always portrayed as altruists. I was like, I find that notion sort of offensive because it suggests that we can only empathize with someone if they're perfect. And with this character, I felt it was so important for him to be imperfect and not always right, and visionary in a way, but also a human being. And ask anyone who lives with an artist, it's a pain in the ass. They usually can't, they've got $0 in their bank account and they're cranky and stubborn. But when I met Adrian, I felt, wow, like, we'll still love the guy. We'll still love him because he's so lovable.
He is. And the character does manage to achieve that despite, he is a very polarizing character. And there's moments when you're really on side with him. And there's moments when you're just thinking like, I'm not sure if he's going to deliver on this. I'm not sure if he's going to go through. And I think also Felicity and Guy in their own way bring a huge amount of warmth.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Guy's character is that Guy was written with more warmth, with more charisma. That Guy just immediately, he understood the assignment, and it was so important to me that character not, feel like, geriatric. Like, it needed to be like a distinguished older man, but that still had this real virility about him. And, and that when I sat down with Guy, I was like, oh, he still is not just charismatic, but has also like real sex appeal. And I thought that would really complicate things in a way that was important for the dynamic between, these 3 characters, because it is sort of a triangle. It is sort of, I would describe it as a love triangle, but there's certainly a tension between the 3 of them.
Yeah, there is, and what you sort of said about Guy is really interesting, because there is this kind of dichotomy of his character. He's very polarizing. There's some moments where you just are not at all on side with him, and he's sort of acting like the rich tyrant. And then there's these moments which were some of my favorite, especially in the sort of the earlier half of the film, where you have characters sitting down and just really, like, it really feels like they're listening to each other, like people don't get to in life very often, where people are like really just talking from the heart and someone else is fully taking on board, like, in the armchair scene where Adrian goes to visit him at the house, and they're just sitting there, and those moments really feel like home, and they feel very, very human, which I think really helps ground the whole film in itself and make it a very pleasant experience.
No, I know. I appreciate that. I mean, it's interesting. That was a sequence that a lot of folks were concerned about in the editorial process, and I thought it was so important to keep it completely intact, because whenever if I were to pull it out, also, it would sort of rush the process of him ultimately offering him this huge, opportunity. So that's part of it. It just created a pacing issue. But also, I felt that we needed to really understand that these two people, why there's this magnetism between them. I think that there's. They each see something in one another, which does often happen in the patron artist dynamic, that an artist feels seen and understood. And there's something so incredibly gratifying about that it can also make an artist sort of look past all of the elephant in the room, so to speak, about the character. With Guy, in the very first scene, he tells you exactly who he is. And yet you spend a lot of the rest of the film trying to convince yourself, like Laszlo, that actually maybe he's more multifaceted than that. And yet in the first 5 minutes, it's established that he's a tyrant, he's a bigot. I mean, but the fact that it's a real credit to Guy Pearce's performance that after that initial scene, he's able to win the audience back, and so it still remains a shock in the second half of the film, when what happens.
It does, and I think that's sort of, I mean, those narcissistic traits, that certain people have. It is always baffling when you're on the other side of it, because there is such a propensity for warmth and empathy and this feeling of connection at one point, and then there's this ability to flip the switch and then suddenly become the tyrant, and I think you sort of balance that very well with Guy's character especially.
Well, it's something I've experienced a lot of. And over the course of my career, and Mona and I often say that we wrote the screenplay as a sort of exorcism. So much of what we had been through and dealt with. Of course, this is all taken to operatic extremes, but we've absolutely found ourselves in situations where we felt, that we were working with someone who was, morally, perhaps, and certainly ethically, ambiguous. These characters where I'm like, like you find yourself laughing at jokes that you wouldn't otherwise, and it's because you're trying to protect the flame of this project, and so it's a strange role, and that sort of cobra dance is something that we were very interested in.
So let's talk a little bit about Felicity, the sort of third part of the triangle, because she's I think in one of the Q&As it was discussed that she's present in the film, but she's not present in the first half of the film in a sense, because you don't sort of see her, but she's got an influence. I mean, was that difficult to sell to her, the idea of the film, or was it just immediately, this is great for me?
This movie was pretty self-selecting. Like, I think that the people that ended up working on it were folks that all felt pretty connected to it from pretty early on. Felicity is actually the only actor in the cast, other than the actors that I've worked with on previous films, that I knew from a very young age. I think we met when I was 18 or 19, but we hadn't been in touch for years. And it sort of occurred to me that she could be really, really exciting for this. And I knew it was a way that no one had ever seen her before. And I knew from, the time we spent together, almost 20 years ago now, 15 or 18 years ago. I knew that she was, really thoughtful, very, very intellectual, voracious reader. I knew that she would find at least something in the screenplay, even if she didn't want to play the role. And I have this sort of relationship with casting. It's this sort of Janet Leigh and Psycho thing where I never want to assume that that just because an actor is recognizable, that they're going to be with us for the duration of the film. Because, for example, it just sort of ruins the effect of the roller coaster. And the great thing about Janet Leigh and Psycho, of course, is she was a huge movie star at the time, and then she's gone after 25 minutes, and you're left with Tony Perkins. And it's the same thing here. I love that our leading lady doesn't arrive for 2 hours, and it was with Vox Lux. It was the same. I remember telling Natalie Portman, you have to flip to page 60, and then you are the lead of the movie, but it takes 60 pages to get there. So.
And I think in a strange way, it actually builds anticipation, and you do very much appreciate when she does arrive. It's like it's like you're waiting for her to arrive as well as the character. That's exactly
right. That's exactly right. And I also, I try to work with actors in a way where Mona and I have been for years sort of trying to build a company of actors, the way that Altman, did or Bergman did, because then you have these wonderful performers coming in and doing sometimes just one or two scenes, but they're so impactful in that context. And so, I find all of these things can be a little bit predictable, like, number one on the call sheet, you're with them from beginning to end. And so there's no real sense of danger.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. So how do you approach the rehearsal period? Do you like to rehearse? Do you like to throw them in at the deep end? Is there lots of conversations?
I would like to rehearse. I would like to, either I would like a little more time to shoot, or I'd like a little more time to rehearse. But the reality is, on these projects, especially the bigger the ensemble, because trying to coordinate that many calendars is really a headache. And I just don't know if I'm ever going to be afforded the opportunity to have that time. I know very, very few filmmakers that have the time to rehearse. We did rehearse a few important scenes. For example, Felicity confronting the family, it's a single take. There's a stunt in the middle of it. It was very complicated. Cinematographically speaking, it was very complicated because we had to shoot an entire magazine of film, and so we didn't even have time to slate it. So it was quite it was something we all had to be prepared for. So there were things like that. Like, I would say that I try to identify 2 or 3 pillars of the project and focus on sort of, us all finding our collective footing within those, 2 or 3 major sequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's often the case in terms of getting everyone into the flow of the film. And I mean, sort of director, heads of departments, actors, whether it's rehearsing one sort of scene or 2 scenes that are really impactful and sort of getting into the real depth of it, or, doing it on set by approaching something quite challenging early on. Once you've got into that space, it seems like everyone sort of falls into that inhabitants sort of afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's absolutely. It's a sense memory thing. It's like, it's like it's a sport in a way. It's a very physical thing. Or, it's like learning a song, and learning text is like, you feel on day one when you start off, learning text for something on stage, like you'll never be able to hold all of that material in mind. And yet, after a week or two of practice, you realize that, we are sort of much more elastic than we realize.
Were there any scenes in particular that maybe weren't working, or you, from a story or a script point of view, when you were on set, that you really had to rethink or sort of problem solve, especially that come to mind?
Not really. I mean, nothing that comes to mind. I mean, what you are always dealing with, of course, is weather. So, like, there are sequences that are designed to be in the rain, and then we planned it for, a day where there was meant to be a storm and then naturally didn't come. And so then there was a lot of text that was in reference to the weather that had to be thrown out and things like that. But I mean, beyond anything like that, not really. I really I ask everyone, in the pre-production process, that's the time to raise any concerns. But once we start shooting, we have such little time on these movies that everyone's point of view is potentially, really valid. But I just don't have the time to try to, audition any new ideas. I have to just stick to the plan. It's the only way that I'm able to finish in such a short period of time.
And it does feel like a very well planned. I mean, your films have that sort of art house edge that means, they definitely have their own distinct kind of vision. When you're watching them. I mean, do you stick fairly rigorously to the sort of shot list style of things? Use a lot of mood boards in pre-production to get all of that across in advance?
There's usually mood boards and references in the art department. There's no storyboards. Storyboards I really struggle with. I've only tried working with them twice, and I was really not thrilled with the result both times. And the reason being that when you storyboard something, you sort of are not responding to the performance, to the space, to the light. And yet everyone becomes very attached to these storyboards. So you've given the storyboards to the camera department and to everyone. And so they get very attached to this comic book, when in fact, if you just show up and you respond to what the light is doing and what the performers are doing, within the framework that you've sort of built for the movie, that's usually the best way to go. I think that whenever I've tried to stick too closely to that sort of plan, you find it doesn't yield very interesting results. I mean, in terms of, there's a few things. I mean, in regards to the sort of formal style of the movies, one is that because the films are shot in such a short period of time, we can't do very many setups. So that means that we sort of do a maximum of 3 setups, but usually scenes are done in 1 or 2. That gives the film, it sort of forges its style in a way, but it also means that, instead of doing many, many things, poorly or just okay, we do 1 or 2 things that day very, very well. And so, because setting up a new shot, that's where you lose the time. Shooting something, if you're doing 15 or 18 takes, it doesn't really matter, because everyone sort of gets into the groove, and it gives them the time and space to really perfect it. And so I think that the movies also, for circumstantial reasons, have a very, very specific style.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for going so much into detail about everything. I mean, it's definitely one of my favorites of the awards season circuit. And I think it's a very complicated and interesting film with a lot of very nice characters.
Thank you so much for spending the time with it. I know it's a long film, so thank you so much.
No, it's well worth every minute. So best of luck, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Brady. Bye-bye.
Well, there we have it. That was Brady Corbet chatting with Dom Lenoir about The Brutalist. Pretty impressive person. I'd be surprised if this doesn't win quite a few Oscars. I really will. Speaking of which, and one I think it definitely will win, is for production design, created by Judy Becker, who is our next guest. Look at that. What are the chances? It's quite interesting, her career. Directors she's worked with: David O. Russell, Todd Haynes, Ryan Murphy, Ang Lee, Lynn Ramsey, Steve McQueen. She talks about that. She talks about the whole process behind it. She started off as a PA. She loves architecture, building, what brutalism means. It's a fascinating chat. We also talk a little bit about working with cinematographer Lol Crowley as well. So I won't waste any more of your time listening to me. You're going to have to listen to me in a minute because I'm the one talking to Judy. But anyway, that's by the by. It's irrelevant. Listen to Judy. Here it is, my chat with an Oscar-nominated production designer, Judy Becker. Hey, Judy. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and the Filmmakers Podcast. Appreciate it. Wow. The Brutalist. It's just, I was blown away by this movie. It was incredible. We watched it in London in this big old cinema with lots and lots of people, and it was an incredible experience. It was
Sounds great.
Mind-blowing. What was the first time you watched it, including the intermission? What did that feel like for you the first time you sat and watched the whole thing?
Oh, it was at the Venice Film Festival, so it was the world premiere, and it was super stressful because the first time,
Was it? Why?
the first time I watch a movie I worked on, I'm mostly looking at my work. I have to admit, like I think most people are craftspeople, and so there's that, and then you don't know how the audience is going to react. So it's nerve-wracking. But yeah. I also thought it was amazing. So there's both of those emotions going on. But it turned out, the audience was really positive in its reaction. So it felt great at the end. And I did take too long at the intermission. So I missed the opening of the train scene, but I'd seen it shot. I'd stayed there a really long time watching it, so I kind of knew what I had missed.
I honestly felt it was magical in that cinema that day. I don't think I've experienced anything like that where we have an intermission. And I said to my co-host, Dom, and fellow filmmaker, I said, I'm interested how many people are going to come back. I think this was even before the film had started because, we'd seen the trailer.
Yeah.
You'd just never know. And I'm delighted to say, I think everyone came back.
It didn't even occur to me that people would leave, but I guess they might, right?
Yeah, because they go, oh, well, I've seen 3 hours. Whatever. But it's intoxicating. It really pulls you into the world. And what was it that Brady first said to get you on board? And obviously you're reading the script and thinking, surely they're going to cut this. Talk us through that process.
Oh, he didn't have to say anything because the way I got on board was I had seen Childhood of a Leader, and I knew who Brady was as an actor because we're both inhabiting the same indie world in New York. And I had no idea he'd become a director. And then I saw Childhood of a Leader and I was like, oh my God, that kid made this movie. Like I was so impressed. And I told my agent I had to work with him, and because I'm very director driven as a designer. That's really what drives what the movies I want to design. And it took I wasn't in time for Vox Lux. He had hired someone else. And then when The Brutalist was announced, and I happen to love Brutalist architecture too. And even though I kind of doubted The Brutalist was going to be about an architect, it still appealed to me. So my agent worked really hard and got me a meeting with Brady, and Brady and I got along, and he gave me the job. And it had, it wasn't hard to convince me because I was the one that wanted it. So.
Yeah, you're the one who was like, no, pick me. I want to do this. And he must have been over the moon because...
Me right here. So, and I have to say it was the best movie making experience I've ever had. And a wonderful group of people. It's incredible working with Brady. And I can't say enough good things about it, seriously. And I've just spent a lot of time with a lot of people who worked on the movie. And it was just really feels good. It was a great group of people and a great experience.
I love that it was a great experience. What was it about it that you say it was, maybe one of the best experiences that you've had? Can you pinpoint a bit?
I think that Brady is, I think that obviously I did love the script, and I did love what the script was saying and what I got to do in the script. And but I think that Brady is a really great director and leader, and he trusts his team members. I think he's a very confident director. He knows what he wants to say, and that he knows that there's not just one way to say it, which is really helpful when you have a low budget, because if someone is stuck and determined that this is the way to do it and there's no other way, it really ties you and restricts you and if you don't have the means to do it, it can actually hurt the movie, because you end up doing something sort of in not the best manner, and you could do something else in a better manner. So you have to be very flexible when you're trying to say something big with not very much money. And I think that flexibility and that confidence makes him just a great director, great leader for his team. And we all work together so well because of that. And I think that there was great communication, and he's just very open, very generous. I don't think there was ever a tiff between him and anybody, but at the same time, he's not a pushover. Like, he knows what he wants. So I can't, it's hard to describe. I've never seen it in anybody else, for real. So it's pretty unique.
Yes, I'd say that's unique. And the fact that you worked on such a big production over, and quite a long shoot, I imagine too. And then
the shoot was 33 days.
That's crazy.
It was a $6 million, it was a $10 million movie with $6 million production budget. It was nothing.
It's unbelievable. You think about the beauty in this film, and this is why we're delighted to chat to you, because this film is stunning. The visual side of it, I really felt I was transported back to that era, which I knew very little about, but I was there. And the brutalist movement of it all, or the correct term is brutalism, correct? Right? And I was like, I didn't know anything about this world, and just stunning and so interesting. How did you get the script, and at that point you go, look, I'm in, and you speak to Brady, and luckily he's like, yes, please, and great. At that point you go, great, okay, but now I need to design this world. What's the first thing you kind of do, in general movies, but it'd be great to, especially with the Brutalist and the epic sets that I feel like they were there anyway, felt that way.
The first thing Brady and I spoke about was the Institute, the big building that Laszlo designs, because the first thing we talked about was, we're not going to build that whole building, and that was good to hear, because obviously we couldn't, in real life, that building would cost way more than the budget of the entire movie. So, but we discussed that we were going to build parts of it, like a wall or a staircase or something. And he asked me to design the building so that we could show it to the producers and figure out which parts we were going to build. And I did. So I designed it. There were some elements that were alluded to in the script besides the massiveness of it and the brutalist style and the concrete. And, there were everything that's seen or said in the script, like the references to the concentration camps and the reflection of the cross on the altarpiece. Those were all scripted. So I incorporated all of those things. And that it didn't take me that long to design it once I sort of started and got a hold of some ideas. And I did some drawings and I showed them to Brady, and he liked it. And it really didn't change that much from there. And it just, it developed a little bit. And then we had this idea of, it developed in two ways. We had an idea of creating a sort of construction site where you saw them building pieces of it here and there. And that really seemed a bit monumental in the movie. It felt like a lot was going on, and it was worrisome because it was hard to get equipment and it was hard to make it look as grand a scale as it should be. But it felt big in the movie, and which was great. And then we also had talked about building a large in-camera visual effects model of the Institute, and we did. We did an interior and an exterior, and it was pretty big. It was probably about 10 feet long. And when you see the Institute, like up on the hill, that's the model with some digital manipulation, but it's basically a three-dimensional model, like something we created. So that was really, and of course we had to design everything about the Institute to create that. And it was pretty fun to do something like that. And Brady, he's very traditional in the best way. And I really am that way too, which is shoot on film, do as much in camera as possible. And I don't think anything looks as good as that. I can always tell when something is digital versus real, and it doesn't fool me. And I think, of course, you can erase stuff and you can't tell, that looks fine. And you can extend stuff and that looks fine. But there are, if you want to pretend that dinosaur looks good, okay. But, it really, and if you're a kid, it looks fine, and if you just suspend disbelief, it's fine, but it's never going to look real, real. So, for a movie like this that needs to seem like it's convincing and authentic, I think that you need to use all the tools that you have to make it seem so. And I think that a CGI institute wouldn't have worked. It would have taken you out of the movie.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a magical moment, and I almost at one point thought, is this a real place? Have they? Honestly, I did. I was like, I want to know. I want to know. And I love that you didn't. And it was.
Many people have thought Laszlo Toth was a real person.
Yes.
And have asked about him. And that's when I was like, maybe I should get a publicist because, it's like.
Because his designs are incredible. And everyone says that in the movie, which maybe is a bit of pressure on you because also then you have to design these incredible things that could win these awards, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it was hard because I actually I've never studied architecture, and a lot of designers have. I haven't, but I'm sort of an autodidact, and I've been interested in architecture my whole life. So it's not that much of a stretch for me.
No. You did art, university or college, right? So, and I'm interested into your journey into filmmaking. I think as everyone listens to this podcast, it's always the journey. How do we do the steps? How do we become filmmakers in whichever capacity? And I really was interested in your journey because it felt like you went, you've just found your place on set as a PA and worked your way up. I'd love to know more about that. How did you find that? How did you get on set in the first place? Because it's never easy.
I mean, the story of how I got on set is kind of boring because I got out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had thought I studied music in college, and I thought I wanted to either be a professional musician, which I really started too late for, or a classical musician, not a cool rock musician. And or teach musicology, which I think I totally became disinterested in when I was in my third year of college. So then I was like a waitress after college, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it's like a bad moment. I think it happens to a lot of people. They're in the real world suddenly, Yes. And my cousin, and I'd always been interested, by the way, in art and architecture and design, and that had been my obsession most of my life. And the music thing happened when I was 17. So the music was late, and the art thing had been my whole life up till then. So my cousin, who worked in the film business, said, maybe you should try working in the art department. Maybe you'd like that. She worked as a camera assistant. So I PA'd on a music video, and I did craft service or, the cutting carrots. And I was treated I learned a lot. I was on the lunch line, and the AD literally pulled me out of the line, by my arm, and said, PAs eat last. And I was like, okay. So it was hardcore. That was old school upbringing, I learned a lot. And you worked 16 hours a day, and you took the garbage out at the end of the day.
Yes.
And they're so coddled nowadays, but
sure. Yes, it has changed. I'd definitely say that. It's definitely changed.
Yeah. I worked in props for a while, and then I got into the union, started working as a set dresser. And that's where I really learned a lot, watching how things were done. And really glad I had that experience, because I think that moving up from being a set dresser or set decorator and watching how sets are created and all the different steps, and working with the scenic painters, because you do work alongside them in New York, especially because in New York, set dressers do a lot of what is construction everywhere else, laying tile and putting in the glass windows. So everyone's working together. So you really get a sense of how sets are created. And that was my best training, doing that, and without any without any responsibility. I mean, I had very small responsibility, but no design responsibility. So I really recommend that kind of training. And I know a lot of people who want to leap into designing, which is fine. It works for some people, but the people I know who have made the best designers have taken a while to get there. And I think that that's it maybe is harder, but I think in some ways, but I think that the more you learn, the better designer you make. And also the more sources of inspiration that you have, the better. I still didn't know I wanted to be a designer at this point, by the way. I had tried it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I had tried it. I had someone, before I got into the union, or maybe just when I got in, someone offered me a job designing a movie. And I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. So I did it. It was a horrible experience, not aesthetically, but personally. Like it was like a very small crew. I had a prop master who was like, kind of like Eve and All About Eve, Yeah. So she was awful. Oh. And I've since heard she's done it to many other people. So it was a bad experience. And then I took a break from the film business for a couple of years and did an office job. And that really was the turning point. Because then I was like, I hate this. I want to go back into the film business and I want to be a production designer. It's just suddenly clicked for me. So I did. I went back. Took a couple of years for me to get going, like get a job, but I did. And that's when my career started for real.
That's so interesting. And actually, I love what you said about the grounding, of having to learn your way up, because I think if you come into a job top level, sometimes you haven't done, like you say, putting out the bins, you haven't understood not necessarily that, but what goes into the other departments and what it means. And you can't just say, oh, well, we're just going to design this here because I want to. You go, well, we can't because actually they need to film this round here. That's so clever. And it, whether you meant to do it or not it just makes total sense. It totally makes sense.
And you have to, like, when I was looking at the library, I was thinking about how are they going to rig the curtains up there? I can't pick a location unless I know there's a way we're going to be able to do it. And that's a part of what that training was about. And I can't just blindly say, yeah, it's going to work. I have to know it's going to work or that there's going to be some way it's going to work. And I do think about those things.
I see that, and that comes from being there on set and actually learning and putting them up yourself and doing all that.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't get up on the ladder because I have a fear of heights, but I always had to say that at the beginning of every job.
It was someone else up the ladder. Yes, I know they've got to go up there. I'm just not going to do it. One of my favorite films, sort of moving into filmmaking myself, was Garden State, Zach Braff's film, which you designed early on. And wow, that must have been, the success of it, perhaps. Was it that particular film that moved things forward for you into Brokeback Mountain and working with Ang Lee, or was it others?
I don't think it helped me get Brokeback Mountain.
Right. No. Okay.
But I think that I did do a movie after it, Thumbsucker, which may have helped me in the sense that the line producer was the same line producer who was going to do Brokeback Mountain. And I had other connections that helped me get the interview with Ang for that. It was a pretty low budget movie also. And my husband had worked with Ang as a script supervisor. So I did have connections, but then I was against two people that were a lot more experienced than me. So what got me the job was the presentation I did for it. I know that. Like, it wasn't, Ang said, yeah, of course, Michael's going to say good things about you. He's your husband.
Of course he has to.
Ang is not a fool. So, and the interview was going terribly. I remember this. No. I flew out to LA because the line producer, he ended up not doing the movie, but he said, Judy, I want you to be the first to meet with him. Go to LA, for the Indie Spirits, because Ang's going to be there and meet with him. So I went to the meeting. It was like at the Beverly Hilton, and I'm sitting having breakfast with him, and he's asking me these weird questions like, how are you going to make them mountains in Canada look like the mountains in America? And I was like trying to think of answers. And I said, well, I'm going to make sure that the trees and all the foliage is the same. And, it's like, and then I brought out my presentation and he looked at it and he just loved it, and because I make a photographic presentation of my idea of what the movie will look like. And I also had brought a book In the American West by Richard Avedon, which at the time was out of print. And I'd found a copy online, and he said, "Where did you get that book?" And he started like taking it. And I said, "I found it online. Do you want it?" And he said, "Yes." And so I got the job.
Because he had to give you the book back.
No, I gave him the book. Yeah,
of course you did. Of course.
Yeah, and it was a funny story about that Avedon book, because when we were packing to go to LA, Michael said, "Why are you bringing that book? It's just pictures of people." And I said, "Because to me, this is the movie. Like these working class cowboys. It just was right." And then when we were in LA, I said, "Maybe you're right. I won't take this book to the meeting." He said, "Take it. You brought it all the way to Los Angeles. Just take that book with you." So I did, and that book and my presentation were what they did the trick, I think. And
they definitely did. I love that story. I love the fact you weren't going to take the book and did. What was in your pitch deck? You said you put your pictures in there. What kind of pictures do you put in?
Mostly from they're from photographers, and I have a lot of photography books. Like at that time, I didn't have as many, but so it was a lot. But I love photography. I love documentary photography, but in the sense of people like Stephen Shore, people that go, take pictures of real things, but not as documentarians, as because they're interested in those things. William Eggleston, those 70s photographers, I really like their work. And I just find images that express something about the look of the world of the movie to me. And they're not literal usually. They're more just a feeling. They're definite, sometimes I put a literal photo in if it's something interesting about the film. And they're usually pretty nice, the lookbooks. I mean, I'm proud of them. I don't take images from other films. That's one thing I don't do. And I know a lot of directors do it. Many directors do it, and commercial directors only do that. Yeah. But I don't do it. And I think it's not interesting to me. And I don't want to copy what some other designer did. I want to come up with a world of my own, really. It's the world of the movie, and I want it to be a world I created. So I try to find, I know the photographs I'm using, other people may have used, it's not like the most obscure photographers always, but often I make this lookbook, and then afterwards when I watch the movie, I can see it in it. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I love the fact that you don't put any other film stills in there, because
never.
I think
maybe occasionally.
Occasionally, but they can get in the way. It suddenly becomes, we're copying that. Well, actually, you're putting stuff in that the cinematographer or the sound team or whatever, they're getting new visions from this rather than we're taking from that film or that film. That's great.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when I've worked with Todd Haynes, he will specifically reference a film, and that's a different thing, because then you want that image in there because but I mean, he'll say, this image is going to look like the image in Petulia. Okay, so all right, so that's fine because that's what the reference is. But that's different from saying it's like a homage, that image. It's different from saying, I want the feeling of this image from whatever, this Tarkovsky thing or what. It's like that scene in The Brutalist that of the people walking on the hillside. That was a deliberate reference, but that's different from, I can't, that's different from just saying, I love the way that thing looked in Nashville and I want to copy that palette and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't do that. I don't put those pictures in.
That's great. That's what Ang loved. And that's really interesting. You've worked with some incredible directors as well over your time, to list a few off, Todd Haynes, Ryan Murphy, Lynn Ramsey, Steve McQueen. Did you always kind of come at it from a different angle with each director, depending on what would you think about, I suppose, or what would someone who's budding production designer now go, okay, that's an interesting choice for working with a new director?
I always come at it from my angle, which is that I want to create a realistic looking world for them, for their project. I always want it to feel real, and by real, I mean that within whatever they want, it shouldn't feel like it was created, like that it's make-believe kind of. So even when Ryan, I'd say the most sort of maybe fantastical set that I did for Ryan would be in Ratched, like that hospital where, I don't know if you saw it, but there's this, hospital hotel where she works. But we really tried to do it so it felt authentic. And I think it does when you watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we based it on a real place and we used a lot of references for it. So I think that one's, a few steps further and it might have not felt, because the story is very scary. I think it's scary, but it's also, you have to balance it with, a little bit of reality. So it's, we tried to make it feel lavish but authentic, so so obviously my sets for those Ryan Murphy miniseries are going to be more lavish looking because those are the kinds of environments those stories take place in. Although in Versace I got to do some really down things too, which was fun, to contrast those with the lavish things. And that was part of the story too. So it's always whatever the story determines for the world, but each director has obviously, it's a different personality. So you're going to work with everybody differently. I guess my approach is always the same, but I'm responding to the director's personality.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, that's a good way.
That you have to be sensitive to the director. You have to respect the director. I always respect the directors I'm working with. And if I don't, that's not going to work out.
Yes.
If there's no mutual respect, it's not going to be a good relationship.
It's a good way of thinking about it as well. Because Steve McQueen, I imagine with Shane, must have just been, he just made his first feature then. So this was, I think so, coming into his second. So that must have been really interesting choice for you. Hunger was so interesting and so provocative. And so, that 25-minute shot, for instance.
Yeah. Well, Steve was pretty confident director because he'd also done a lot of art, videos
so
and
art.
things.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and Sean, his DP, it was such an interesting DP because he'd been a award videographer, I guess. So I scouted this one location when I think Sean was back in England, and we were looking for a kind of a sex club with a maze in it. And
he found one.
Location manager, David, who's a good friend of mine. We went to this, it's not there anymore, but there was a swingers club, like a straight swingers club where people would go and swing.
Yes.
And I had no idea that this place existed. And it was, and we went, it was called Le Trapeze. And up on the top floor, it had this really low ceilinged room with this little maze of little rooms and things and these red lights, and we were like, wow, this is so great, but obviously we could never shoot here because the ceiling was like 6 feet tall. I mean, it was crazy, and you couldn't light it. And when Sean came back, we were telling him about it. He's like, well, wait a minute, let me see it. I was like, Sean, it's like so low ceiling. So we took him there and he's like, I can light this, I'll just put rope lights everywhere. And I was like, okay, great, So he did, and we shot there. I think we built a set of it so it could be longer, but we did shoot it there, and he could light anything. He'd use like one lamp to light Michael Fassbender's bedroom, and we shot on the 40th floor of an apartment building. So it was a really interesting experience because I've worked with a lot of different DPs and a lot of different really talented DPs and DPs that have won a lot, Oscars. And it's just interesting to see how different they all are. And a lot of them light only with practicals. And that's actually, I like that a lot because I think it looks really good. And it's, but it's just, I can shoot white, no white. I can't shoot white, and I can't shoot in an apartment on the 40th floor ever, and it's just, but this guy can, and it's just, so to each his own. I'm not saying shame's, the cinematography is, some people another cinematographer might think it looks horrible. I don't know if that's not my job, but it's just was an interesting experience to see how different other people are. So I like that. I like seeing
Shane Bobbitt there. That really interesting. And going on to DOPs then with Lowell Crowley and bringing it back to the Brutalist.
Yeah, Lowell was great to work with.
Yeah, that must have been so interesting, the collaboration and getting those incredible shots within your beautiful production design. Could you talk about that relationship? That'd be wonderful.
It's funny because I met Lowell a long time ago. I don't know when, because it was at Sundance and it was one of his first movies. Maybe it was his first American movie. It was called, of course, I can't remember the name of it now. I always call it the blue movie because everything was blue in it. I can't remember. Anyway, it's was an independent movie, and it was took place in the South, and it was gorgeous. And I really wanted to meet him because it was so beautifully shot. And Ballast, that's what it was
Ballast,
called.
yes.
Yeah. And so my husband and I were there, and we went up to him afterwards. I think we ended up having breakfast with him and stuff, or hanging out with him a bit. And then I never really met him again until I met him with Brady. So, it was maybe 15 years or something. So
right.
It was probably 15 years. And, but I was happy because I knew he did beautiful work, and I knew he was a really nice person. So I was really excited to work with him. And I thought I'd seen his movies that he'd done with Brady, and they looked great. So I thought Childhood of a Leader was one of the best looking period movies I had ever seen. So it was exciting to work with him. And I think he and Brady, just are a great team. And I was really happy to be a part of it. I don't know. It's hard for me to, you work with someone and you admire what they did. And I don't know, I just sort of gush a lot, and I don't know how to talk about it. He wasn't difficult to work with at all. It was easy.
Yeah, and you complement each other so well. And the film is incredible. You've done an amazing job. Huge congratulations to you. Really.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
incredible.
You.
Judy Becker, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on. I'd love to chat to you even longer, but I know you've got a full day of this. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're a star. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
That was Judy Becker. That was the first part of our Brutalist podcast episode, because we have Guy Pearce on Friday. Yep, you're going to really enjoy that. I thoroughly enjoyed having a chat with him in BAFTA. As it happens, sat and chatted in BAFTA. Just me and him in a room. Had a really good laugh. It's great. You're going to enjoy that. That is coming up Friday. The Brutalist is out in cinemas now. Go watch it. Huge shout out to Tolly Shields for setting this up. Thank you. Thank you. Go out there, make your films this week. It might be hard to make a film as epic and as grand as The Brutalist, but that shouldn't stop you trying, because they made this on a very slim budget for what it is, and they made it in, as you know, in a very short period of time. So if they can do it, you can too. It might be on a smaller scale, but who cares? It's about getting there. It's about getting to the next steps. Or do you know what? Make it on a bigger scale. Aim high. Either way, go out there and do something to make your film this week. Be inspired. Be wonderfully inspired. Right, I'll see you all on Friday when I chat to Guy Pearce. And if you're lucky enough to rise up and do well, like a huge architectural brutalist period style building, then it is your duty to send that elevator that's been built in that gorgeous building back down to help other filmmakers out there. I've been Giles Alderson. Thank you very much for your time. See you later. Bye.